One of my favorite factors in all of the psychology of money has to do with something called the pain of paying. And here is the idea. Imagine that you go to dinner. It's an expensive dinner. It's a good dinner. At the end of the dinner, you are paying. And you can pay either with the cash or with credit card. Ask yourself, which one would feel worse? Which one would you feel a bit more ting, a bit more unpleasantness? It would kind of diminish the joy of the meal. Basically, everybody, when they ask this question, said the cash would feel worse than the credit card. Now, why? Why does the cash feel so different? You know how much the meal would cost. This is no surprise. You see the prices on the menu. But something about the cash feels differently. Where is it coming from? And there is this notion of the pain of paying, which says that the agony of parting with our money has to do with the saliency of do we see this money going away? And it has to do with the timing of whether the money is going away at the same time that we're consuming. So imagine the following example. Imagine that I owned a restaurant, and I learned over time that people basically eat 50 bites and pay $50. That's what everybody does, or more or less everybody does. And I came to you and I said that because I like you so much, I'm going to give you a great discount. It's going to be 50 cents per bite. I'll only charge you 50 cents per bite, and not only that, I'll only charge you for the bites you eat. So I'll serve you your dish, I will stand back, I will open my little notebook, and every time you will take a bite, I will write a V in this to indicate how many bites you took. And at the end of the meal, I will charge you 50 cents only for the bite you took. Now ask yourself, is this going to be a financially efficient meal? Of course. You start at 50 cents per bite and only for the bites you eat. But how much fun will that meal be? Probably will be quite terrible. In fact, in my PhD seminar, not too long ago, I tried that. I usually bring lunch for the students in the PhD seminar. And on that particular day, I told them that I'm going to charge them 25 cents per bite. I brought pizza at the same day. And you know what? Their bites were so huge, it was awful. Like they basically stuffed their face to get the maximum amount of bites. And you know, they were really good. These are PhD students. They're really very well versed in getting free food and eating very quickly. But at the end of the day, they did not enjoy it. Sure, they paid a little less, but the misery was very high. Here's another way to think about it. Imagine you're going for a cruise. It's a cruise to Alaska. It's a beautiful cruise. And you have two ways of paying. You can either pay 3 months in advance before you go on the cruise, or you can pay the moment you get off the boat. Which one of those is the economically efficient way to pay? Of course, the moment you get off the boat. You keep the money for longer, you can invest it, and so on. But ask yourself, how would you feel during the cruise if you know that at the end of the cruise you have to pay all this amount? Ask yourself, how would you feel on the last day of the cruise, knowing that tomorrow you're going to be parting with all this money? You will probably spend the whole day in the buffet trying to amortize your investment, trying to get as much as you can back, and then of course you'll have to pay a trainer or go to the gym or do something else to try and get rid of this extra weight. So what's interesting here is that we have this notion of the pain of paying, and what the pain of paying does is it adds a moral tax onto our consumption, and because of that it changes how we feel about payment. And what's also interesting about this moral tax, it's about saliency. It's about how we feel about this payment, how much attention we give to it, how much do we notice it, and because of that it can change how we enjoy the experience. So think about the following question. Are there cases in which you would like to increase the pain of paying, and are there cases in which you like to decrease the pain of paying? So think about this for a minute or so. Here are a couple of ways to think about the pain of paying and is it good or is it bad. So for example, I think that if we go around our consumption day by day, we might want to feel more pain of paying. We might say to ourselves, oh, you know what, I'm spending too much money on all kinds of things. Let me feel more pain of paying. Let me switch from credit cards, which disassociate the consumption from the timing of the payment, to cash. Or if I can't go all the way to cash, maybe I'll go to debit cards, which give you some sense of paying at the moment. Maybe I'll sign up for automatic notification that every time I use my debit card would let me know that I just spent some money, and that would increase the pain of paying and control my spending to some degree. You can also think about the difference between paying for gasoline and paying for electricity. When we pay for gasoline, we stand in the gas station, we put the thing in, we press the button, and we see this running around. There's an incredibly high pain of paying feeling to it because we see the amount of money running. You could imagine, by the way, an even worse version. You could imagine that filling the gas station would be instantaneously and with no amount of money, but then the gas company will have a little meter running in your car. And as you're driving, you see how many cents are being taken away from your bank account, and every time you press fast on the accelerator, it would go a little faster. That would probably maximize the pain of paying. But with gas, even the way it is now with petrol, we have this increased high pain of paying. We see the amount of money, we buy a lot of it every time, we see it running around. Think about electricity. Electricity, we have no meter in the home, it's usually outside, we don't see it progressing. It's automatically taken from our checking account a month and something later after we finish consuming it. No pain of paying. Now maybe we should have brought some pain of paying into it. For example, what if we put the meter in the middle of the living room? Right? Now we would take it. Or even better, there used to be this English system where for heating at home you would put coins into the system and it would heat your house just for a while. Imagine your air conditioning and heater was working like this. Every time you wanted heat or AC, you would put the money in and it would run until it used, and then you had to put more money in. Now the pain of paying would increase further. Your house would probably not be as comfortable as you want. Now, there are some cases we might want to decrease the pain of paying. Imagine you go on vacation. And you go on vacation, it's an expensive place, and you spend lots of money on it, but in the evening you want this particular drink, a martini. And it's expensive. Now if you feel the pain of paying and you have to pay extra for the martini, you might decide not to have that martini. But is this the right thing? Well, if you paid for a prepaid vacation that includes everything, you might spend in absolute terms more money, but you would not have to think about all of these small components. And by not having to think about all of these small components, you might actually enjoy your vacation to a high degree. So you can imagine how prepaying for something, or paying for an all-inclusive vacation, or paying to reduce the pain of paying could actually get you to do something that you want to do but have a hard time doing. And here's one last example of the agony of pain of paying and how to reduce it. And this has to do with what is an ideal gift. Think about it. What is an ideal gift? And I don't mean that you could say, shoes or a backpack or something like that. What are the characteristics of an ideal gift? And one thing about an ideal gift is that it removes the pain of paying from other people. So I'm sure all of you have things that you want but don't feel right about getting. And those are exactly the things that are a great gift because you want it, and this pain of paying is preventing you from doing this. So imagine, for example, that you walk down the street and at the window of a store you see a hat. And you put on the hat and it's beautiful. It's wonderful, it's the right color and size, beautiful shape, really interesting. But then you take it off and you look at the price and you say to yourself, I just can't imagine paying this amount of money for a hat. Who really buys hat? You put it back, you go home, and you find out that your significant other bought the same exact hat for you from your joint checking account. What do? Do you say, honey, thank you very much, I thought about it, I considered it, but I decided it was not worth it, please take the hat and return it? Of course not. You would be incredibly grateful. Why? Because your significant other has just taken this pain of paying out of the transaction, giving you only the benefits. And that's, by the way, one of the characteristics of a good gift. So going back in general to the pain of paying, it means that payment have the opportunity cost, right? You're giving up something when you're buying something, which we don't always notice, but it's a part of the disutility. It has hassle component, taking cash, taking credit cards, and so on. But it also has a component of the pain of paying, of a moral tax, of some guilt that is associated with the payment. And different methods of payment could create different amount of guilt, and different timing of payment would create different guilt. So if we prepaid for vacation, not so much guilt. If we pay for vacation or for meal for every bite, maximum guilt. If we pay after the fact, like in credit cards, not so much guilt. In addition to the timing, the method of payment also matters. If you go to a casino and you take $1,000 and you transition them to chips, Now you've basically, in your mind, taken all this amount of money and allocated them to be spent in the casino. Not so much pain of paying is involved now when you spend it. Or if I gave you $1,000, good for an online store, for 10 years, the money would be associated with that particular purchase. There will be no pain of paying, and you would find it incredibly easy to spend on that category. There was a very interesting case about the pain of paying that happened many years ago with America Online. America Online, for a long time, used to charge people by the hour. In fact, they had two packages. You could pay $19.95 for 20 hours, and then plus $2.95 for every additional hour. Or you could get a smaller package of $9.95 for 5 hours plus $2.95 for each additional hour. But most people took the 20 hours for $19.95 and they paid additional. And then at some point in 1996, at the end of 1996, AOL decided to move to a membership in which there would be no charge for the additional hour. So instead of $19.95 for 20 hours plus $2.95 per hour, they moved to $19.95 for all the amount of time that you can consume. Now, let's assume that you're going to make this transition from this tier system up to 20 hours and then each additional hour cost you, to the system in which you could use as much as you want. What do you have to try and estimate? You have to try to estimate how many people are going to start using more. That was a period where modems were around, and America Online had to decide how many more modems to have. So they basically looked at the distribution of how many people used it. And they said the people who are using more than 20 hours, they were constrained by the marginal cost. So the people who use more than 20 hours would probably want to use more, maybe another 10 hours, maybe another 20 hours. These are people that were constrained by the marginal cost. But the people who used 19 hours were not really constrained. They could have used another hour. But they said, maybe the people who used 19 hours were a little bit constrained because they kind of missed the calculations. But the people who used 10 hours, those people clearly didn't have any more demand. They could have used another 10 hours and don't pay for it. So they look at this distribution. They looked at the number of people who spend more than 20 hours and assumed that they will use much more. They took the people who spend 19 and maybe 18 hours and so on and said maybe they will use a little bit more because they got confused with the calculation and trying to keep track. And based on that, they increased their capacity by a tiny amount. But what actually happened that night? Their demand quadrupled. Right? Why? Because it wasn't just about the 20 hour. It was about the fact that if you were an AOL user, and I was in those days, if you were an AOL user in those days, I guess I'm dating myself, sorry for that, but if you were like me, an AOL user in those times, you had a little clock, a little bit like the gas meter, like the gasoline meter, that runs around and says, finished 1 hour, finished 2 hours. And even though I might never get to my 20 hours, this was an annoying feeling. Just knowing what it is, and it's counting and going up and up and up, was an annoying feeling. And because of that, even the people who were using very little, all of a sudden changed dramatically their behavior and started using much more. Now, to AOL's sad reality, they were completely unprepared for that. So that night, they had to deal with all kinds of excess demand, and they had to hire lines and get all the small operators to help them out. And these small operators were only happy to, stick it to them and overcharge them for this particular privilege. But this was a case in which AOL should have been prepared. Right? AOL made the rational calculation as if what was stopping them was only the marginal cost. But if you think about people as what's stopping them is both the rational cost, the increased marginal cost, but also the pain of paying, you would make very different predictions about what's right and wrong, and very different predictions about how your market would look like before such a change and after such a change.